Most people live their lives reacting to noise, reacting to judgment, reacting to distraction. But peak performers, those who achieve, create, and sustain excellence, operate differently. They understand something that science now confirms: real transformation happens in silence. Of silence, the brain isn't inactive, it's reorganizing. When external stimuli are reduced, the brain shifts its attention inward, increasing activity in networks associated with reflection, self-assessment, and goal setting. This isn't philosophical, it's biological. The default mode network, DMN, a group of brain regions that becomes active during rest and introspection, lights up when you're not talking, not reacting, and not consuming. That activity isn't wasted. It's where your brain processes past experiences, simulates future scenarios, and refines your identity. By removing distractions and entering a silent state, you allow the DMN to function optimally, enhances clarity of thinking and personal insight. This is the neurological foundation of the idea that silence brings answers. In silence, the prefrontal cortex, the brain's executive command center, can do its job without interruption. This region handles planning, decision making, and regulating your emotions and behaviors. When it's overloaded with noise, social input, constant dopamine hits from digital platforms or conversation, it can't properly perform. But when the noise drops and you're focused inward, the prefrontal cortex operates more efficiently. You become better at managing urges, delaying gratification, and staying on task. How silence sharpens focus. It's not about being antisocial or aloof, about giving your biology the space to work for you instead of against you. Neurologically, attention is a limited resource. Every sound and conversation costs something. Every time you divide your attention, you weaken the signal your brain is trying to follow. Kinesm, silence is the medium that strengthens that signal. When you reduce sensory input, the thalamus, the brain's sensory gatekeeper, sends cleaner data to the cortex. This improves perception, mental endurance, and focus precision. That's why monks, elite performers, and peak athletes all practice intentional silence. They're not withdrawing from the world. They're optimizing their sensory processing and conserving mental energy. Even short periods of silence throughout the day can improve cognitive control. Shows that brief silent breaks enhance memory consolidation and learning. When you stop input and pause the noise, the hippocampus has a chance to encode new information and form stronger neural connections. How clarity and learning deepen, not through hustle and overload, but through selective focus and strategic silence, becomes even more important when you're trying to perform under pressure. In those moments, silence isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. It stabilizes the nervous system, reduces cortisol, and recalibrates your stress response. When you focus inward without speaking, you're also training the anterior cingulate cortex, a region responsible for monitoring conflicts and enhancing attention. In other words, you're improving your ability to recognize distractions and return your focus to what matters. This isn't about zoning out. It's about zoning in. Internal focus is like lifting weights for your attention span. The more you do it, the stronger your mind becomes at resisting distraction and sustaining deep work. Enhancement through silence isn't a theory. It's something you can train. Neuroscience tells us that neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change, responds to attention. Whatever you focus on repeatedly, stronger circuits surround. Silence gives you the opportunity to direct that focus intentionally. Instead of reacting to inputs, you create space to define your direction. This is how clarity emerges and how execution becomes easier. You're no longer battling distraction. You're aligned with your internal goals. That alignment is the essence of high performance. There's also a biological rhythm to focus and silence. Operates on ultradian cycles, roughly 90-minute waves of heightened alertness followed by natural dips. If you use those dips to rest in silence rather than scroll or talk, you restore your attentional capacity much more effectively. In silence, the parasympathetic nervous system, your rest and digest mode, activates. This restores mental and physical energy and prepares the brain for another cycle of high output. You can work harder and longer, not by pushing through, but by recovering intentionally in silence. Ultimately, silence is not emptiness. Clarity, restoration, and neurological optimization. When you allow yourself to be alone with your thoughts, your brain adapts to that stillness. It begins filtering noise better, solving problems faster, and focusing more deeply. In that quiet space, you begin to realize what truly matters and how much of your energy has been wasted reacting to the world. You don't need to talk about your goals or prove your focus to others. Your biology will do the talking through. Your performance mind will speak clearly, because it finally has the silence to do so. Internal rewards are far more powerful and sustainable than external validation. The human brain is designed to respond to both, builds lasting motivation, while the other creates dependence. When your behavior is driven by likes, approval, or applause, you're relying on dopamine that comes from unpredictable and often uncontrollable sources. A fragile system, your motivation rises and falls with others' reactions. But when you learn to generate dopamine from the process itself, from doing the hard thing, from staying consistent, tiny progress, you're creating a self-sustaining engine of effort and resilience. This is where real transformation begins. System is the engine behind motivation. It's not just about pleasure, it's about anticipation and pursuit. Attach dopamine release to effort rather than outcome, your brain begins to crave the challenge. That's neuroplasticity in action. Time you become the type of person who seeks growth, not praise. You stop waiting for the world to notice you and start noticing the power of your own discipline. That shift rewires the brain's reward circuits and makes high performance repeatable. People who rely on external rewards often burn out faster. They operate from a state of constant evaluation. Am I being seen? Am I being recognized? That mindset floods the brain with anxiety and uncertainty. Amygdala, the brain's fear center, on high alert. But internal reward systems calm the nervous system, activate the prefrontal cortex and striatum, which work together to create focused drive and a sense of internal purpose. When your motivation is anchored in values, not applause, you can withstand criticism, delay gratification, and push through resistance. The science supports this again and again. One of the most powerful ways to train internal motivation is through the deliberate practice of struggle. When you engage in something difficult, whether it's cold exposure, intense focus, or silent self-reflection, and you link that struggle to growth, you start to enjoy the process. This doesn't mean the pain disappears. It means the brain sees it as meaningful. That meaning releases dopamine. It becomes a loop. You struggle, you grow, you feel rewarded, not because someone clapped, but because your brain recognizes the internal win. Is what high performers live in. They are not immune to discomfort. They've simply taught their brains to enjoy it. Every time you depend on an external signal to feel worthy, you train your brain to look outward. That creates a state of chronic comparison and disappointment. The more you chase recognition, the more empty you feel when it's not there. When you find joy in the work itself, when you enjoy showing up, solving problems, discipline, you take full control of your neurochemistry, you reduce the volatility of your emotions, and you stabilize your energy. This is not a mindset shift alone. It's a neurobiological strategy that makes motivation something you can own. The brain learns to reward effort, not just results. You develop what's known as a growth mindset. This isn't just a belief system, a biological basis. Neuroplastic changes occur faster when effort is rewarded. Synaptic connections strengthen when the brain expects progress through work. That's why focusing on internal rewards improves learning. Retention, it's not just about feeling good. It's about performing better at a fundamental neurological level. Internal motivation makes you smarter, faster, and more resilient. Social media, for all its benefits, has conditioned many people to seek quick validation. But the brain wasn't built for this. It was built to feel satisfaction from survival behaviors, effort, exploration, learning. That's where real dopamine comes from. You can still succeed in the modern world, but you have to train your nervous system to seek intrinsic rewards. That might mean spending time in silence, working without posting about it, growing without broadcasting. Ironically, internal focus often leads to the very success others try to chase through performance. But the difference is you're not dependent on applause. You're driven by alignment. When you eliminate the need for external validation, your energy becomes more directed. You stop wasting time trying to convince others of your worth. You spend that energy becoming someone whose results speak for themselves. That quiet confidence is powerful, the kind of presence that doesn't need attention to thrive. It's the kind of focus that gets things done. Over time, others will notice, but by then, you won't need them to. You'll already be fulfilled because your brain learned the truth. The best motivation is the one you control from within. Solitude is not isolation. It's a strategic state of deep alignment between the brain and personal goals. When you choose to be alone, especially in silence, you're creating a neurobiological condition where the brain can access higher order thinking, long-term planning, and true self-assessment. The anterior cingulate cortex and the prefrontal cortex become more active during these moments, which leads to an increase in self-awareness, emotional regulation, and attention control. These are the exact neural patterns seen in people with strong self-discipline and internal clarity. The brain is not distracted by external stimuli or social feedback, and this opens the door to profound mental clarity and focus. When you're alone with your thoughts, the brain begins to filter through priorities. It organizes information based on what truly matters to you rather than what society or others suggest should matter. This process is automatic, and it's deeply tied to the way your dopamine system is wired. Without the constant interference of comparison or social pressure, your brain starts attaching reward value to ideas and goals that are internally meaningful. That's how solitude helps realign your reward system toward what's purposeful and sustainable. You don't need a crowd to discover your drive. You need a moment of quiet and the courage to sit with your mind. In solitude, the mind becomes more selective. You begin to think more deliberately, act more intentionally, and feel more stable. Research shows that people who engage in regular silent solitude experience lower stress reactivity, improved emotional balance, and greater cognitive control. This isn't about avoiding people or disconnecting from the world. It's about strengthening your inner world so you can return to the outer one with more focus and power. The nervous system, when left undisturbed, rebalances itself. It recalibrates your emotional state, reducing baseline anxiety and increasing parasympathetic activity, helps the body heal and recover. Solitude also activates the hippocampus and the medial prefrontal cortex, areas involved in memory, term vision, and reflection. These regions don't get fully activated in states of distraction or social engagement. So many breakthrough ideas come when you're alone, walking, meditating, journaling, or simply sitting quietly. Need space to think deeply. Without solitude, your cognitive bandwidth gets consumed by constant reaction. In silence, however, can engage in synthesis. It pieces together what you've learned, experienced, and imagined, creating the foundation for deep insight and long-range thinking. When you're constantly around people, even when you're not talking, devotes energy to social monitoring. It tracks how you're being perceived, what others are feeling, and how you should respond. Consumes a huge amount of cognitive and emotional energy. Solitude suspends that system. It lets the brain turn its focus entirely inward. That inward shift doesn't just conserve energy, it amplifies your ability to self-regulate. You become less impulsive, more thoughtful. You're no longer shaped by external pressure, but guided by internal standards. Goal alignment occurs most effectively when you remove the noise. The frontal lobes, responsible for forward planning, quiet, and uninterrupted attention to build coherent strategies. This is why solitude is common among the world's most effective thinkers, scientists, and athletes. It's not a romantic myth, it's a cognitive necessity. High achievers often enter solitude not to escape, align. They review their progress, clarify their purpose, and make adjustments without the influence of other people's fears or opinions. They know that performance in the world requires clarity in the mind, and clarity begins in solitude. If you want to perform at your peak, you have to periodically step back and listen to your own mind. That doesn't mean disconnecting from your responsibilities or abandoning collaboration. Building a habit of focused solitude into your routine, a walk without your phone, a quiet session of writing or breathing, a deliberate moment to review your goals and redirect your attention. These micro moments of solitude have a cumulative effect. They strengthen the neural circuits responsible for self-control, focus, and insight. They build the kind of mind that isn't swayed by noise or emotion, but rooted in clarity and direction. Solitude is not about being alone forever. It's about becoming so centered that you can walk back into the noise without losing yourself. It gives you the ability to lead your own mind, regulate your own emotions, and stay committed to your path even when others don't understand it. In that silence, your deepest priorities become loud. Your real values surface. And most importantly, your brain becomes your ally, working with you, against you, as you pursue goals that matter deeply and uniquely to you. The brain is constantly adapting to the inputs and behaviors you repeat. When you consistently choose stillness and silence, even for short durations, you are signaling to your nervous system that it's time to downshift, reset, and focus. Over time, this repeated behavior becomes a training mechanism. Just as lifting weights builds muscle, stillness strengthens neural circuits involved in attention, emotional regulation, and stress resilience. Stimulation and enter a quiet state, your sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight system, takes a step back. Parasympathetic system, the rest and recover system, takes over. This shift helps your body lower cortisol, regulate heart rate, and improve your baseline sense of calm. You don't need hours of meditation. You need consistent moments of intentional stillness that train your brain to function under pressure without breaking. Stillness is not about doing nothing. It's an active recalibration of the mind. When you sit in silence and do not react, speak, or chase distractions, your prefrontal cortex remains engaged. This is the region responsible for executive function. Planning, controlling impulses, managing emotions, and holding goals in mind. Stillness helps you practice keeping this region online. Even when your environment tempts you to react, the more you stay still and focused, the more resilient this part of the brain becomes. You begin to respond to challenges rather than react to them. You build the kind of presence that remains calm in chaos. That is the mark of someone operating at peak performance, not someone who avoids difficulty, but someone who maintains control through it. A silence also enhances the brain's ability to process information. In a world filled with nonstop input, most people suffer from cognitive overload, blankenism. When you take time to be still, the brain begins to consolidate memories, organize thoughts, and make connections. Shows that silent rest periods improve both short-term and long-term memory. They allow the hippocampus to replay and encode recent experiences, strengthening the mental framework for learning. When your brain isn't busy filtering noise, it can focus on refining knowledge, identifying patterns, and preparing for future challenges. That's why the most effective strategies often emerge from quiet moments of reflection rather than loud debates or groupthink. In silence, attentional system gets a break from multitasking. It enters a focused state where energy is directed toward a single thought problem. This deep focus builds myelin around the neurons involved in the task, which improves speed and efficiency. The biological foundation of mastery: every time you work deeply in silence, you're increasing your brain's capacity to perform that task better the next time. Is why stillness leads to superior results. It's not about slowing down your ambition, but about making your effort more efficient. You begin to achieve more with less wasted energy. Stillness also rewires the way you interpret discomfort. People avoid silence because it confronts them with their own thoughts. If you stay with that discomfort and observe it rather than run from it, your brain learns not to fear introspection. You become more emotionally grounded. You no longer need distraction to feel okay. That shift reduces anxiety and increases mental endurance. You become capable of sitting with difficult emotions, which is the root of mental toughness. It's not about being unfeeling, it's about being strong enough to feel without crumbling. That strength is built in silence through the repeated act of facing your inner world without running from it. Over time, consistent stillness builds a stable emotional baseline. Less reactive to noise, stress, or criticism, your internal world becomes a place of clarity, not chaos. Inner stability translates into external performance. You speak with more authority, move with more intention, with more confidence. People notice not because you're loud, but because you're calm. They follow you not because you dominate. Your presence is grounded and unshakable. This kind of power is not given by others. It's developed through deep, consistent stillness. The science of stillness is clear. The nervous system thrives when it has periods of calm to restore itself. Better when it is not overwhelmed. The mind becomes sharper when it is allowed to reflect without distraction. Peak performance is not about constant action. It's about smart, regulated effort guided by a centered, well-trained mind. Stillness is the training ground for that mind. It's where you test your focus, expand your awareness, and master your emotional landscape. You don't need permission to practice it. You don't need a perfect setting. You need only to start. A few minutes a day, a commitment to silence, to listen to yourself more than the world. That's how it begins. And with time, that stillness becomes your strength.